I'm Tony May, the Pennsylvania spokesperson for the National Popular Vote Initiative. We have a brief program today, starting with B. Thomas Golisano. His bio is in your blue portfolio. He's the founder of Paychex, one of the nation's second largest payroll service, and has been devoting a great deal of time recently and resources personally to promoting the National Popular Vote campaign. Tom will give us a brief explanation of what the program is about. He'll be followed by Representative Mark Cohen of Philadelphia, who will talk about the Pennsylvania bill itself, and also here is Representative Tom Creighton from Lancaster County. Then when they're done, we'll have questions from reporters.
Thank you, Tony. First of all, it's a real pleasure to be here and in the presence of Representative Creighton and Representative Cohn, who have been very supportive of the National Popular Vote program. To put it in its simplest terms, what the National Popular Vote bill is two things. One, it's to have an election for the President of the United States that's based on the total vote for the candidate. In other words, the candidate with the most votes wins the election. In 4 of our 55 presidential elections, the candidate with the least number of votes has become the President of the United States. And everybody surely knows about the example and the impact of what happened in Florida. A more recent example of a dangerous situation was in 2004, when George Bush had a 3.5 million majority vote over John Kerry for the presidency. And John Kerry almost became the president. All it would have taken was 60,000 people in the state of Ohio to vote a different way, and John Kerry would have been president, even though he had 3.5 million more votes. George Bush did. The second thing, equally as important, is we have a system of electoral process that we have today that shows particular favorability from candidates to certain states. The states that are in doubt as to whether or not a particular candidate is going to carry that state is called a battleground state. States that it's fairly well predetermined by polling and so forth are called flyover states. In a typical U.S. election, there are 35 flyover states and 15 battleground states. The candidates themselves in 2008 spent 98% of their resources and their time in the 15 battleground states. The other 35 states literally were ignored. The candidates didn't seek out their issues, their concerns, anything, their needs that they thought would be important in these 35 states. There's also a really large negative of being a resident of a flyover state, particularly if you have a tendency to vote for the party or the candidate that has least number of votes. And that is, your vote doesn't count. When you wake up Wednesday morning, I think what the American public wants is to see on that television the fact that their vote was actually in the count, and secondly, that the candidate with the most votes won the election. We do not have that situation today. Okay, so what am I doing here? I am the national spokesperson for National Popular Vote Bill. Within the Constitution of the United States is the delegation to the states to choose the method of electing the president. So this work does not include anything to do with the U.S. Constitution, certainly does not require a constitutional amendment. But what it does mean is individual states, their legislature and their governors can approve legislation to say, we want to change this process to national popular vote. We want to break down this enigma of flyover and battleground states. To date, we have 7 states and the District of Columbia have already passed this legislation, representing 80 electoral votes. We need 270. The 80 electoral votes that we have so far were secured by an individual. His name is John Koza, working very independently with limited resources. He's an academic at Stanford University. He secured the 80 electoral votes. This got my attention and others' attention, and I have decided to commit myself and my resources to getting this done. Basically, we are putting together a full lobbying effort in the remaining 43 states. We need to get this done. We want to get this done by the end of 2012, effective for the 2016 election. We also starting grassroots efforts, the Facebook, the Twitters, the social networks, as well as grassroots organizations. In the event, in some states that have initiative and referendum, that we may be going to initiative and referendum if the legislature doesn't act. Now, to make this work, we need states that represent 270 electoral votes. We have 80. When we get to 270 or more, because I think the rest of the states will follow through, we will go to the national popular vote process, and it will be based on the votes in the entire country, not just the states that pass the legislation. In other words, these states will get together, they actually sign a contract, it's called a compact. We have compacts around natural resources, public transportation, etc., environmental issues. This would be another contract among the states, just as it exists now for the electoral process, that says whoever gets the most votes, all these 270 plus electoral votes will go to that candidate. And very simply, that is all that's required. The thing to remember, it's not a constitutional issue. It's a state issue, state by state. And that's what we're doing today and we'll be doing for the next year and a half, is going from state to state and encouraging legislators to pass this legislation. And it comes down, and I'll repeat it before I introduce Mark, I'll repeat one more thing. We want the candidate with the most votes to win, and we want every vote to count equally. We don't know how this could be any other way but democratic. And certainly the way we're doing it now isn't democratic. Okay, now I'd like to introduce Representative Mark Cohn to come up and say a few words.
Thank you very much, Tom. I deeply appreciate your active national leadership in this issue. I also appreciate your choosing Pennsylvania as the first state as you begin a national tour. I believe that Tom Golisano is well known for his activities in New York politics and in the business world and the sports world as the recent owner of the Buffalo Sabres hockey team. Certainly is so far the highest visibility figure to endorse this, and his time, energy, creativity, and resources will be very helpful in passing it. I'd like to begin by talking about Pennsylvania. While all voters under this system suffer in one way or another, let me talk about how the Electoral College disenfranchises Pennsylvania voters specifically. Because each state's number of electors is equal to the number of members of Congress, including senators, smaller states have much more electoral votes per capita. Wyoming, with 519,886 residents, has more than 4 times per capita electoral college representation of more populous states, such as California and Pennsylvania. This means that a Wyoming voter has more than 4 times as much power as a Pennsylvania voter. Pennsylvania is among the most underrepresented states in the Electoral College. The number of congressional representatives and therefore electors is determined by the census, which includes non-voters, such as those under 18, as well as illegal immigrants. And this benefits states in the Gulf West, in the Southwest, and the Gulf Coast. To make matters worse, a relatively small share of Pennsylvania's population is made up of non-voters. We have very few illegal immigrants, for instance. So we are doubly penalized by the system. While Pennsylvania is the 6th most populated state, We ranked 5th in number of votes cast in the last presidential election. Put another way, while only 84,866 Wyoming votes were cast per each elector awarded, Pennsylvania cast 300,664 votes per elector, a huge disparity. Only Ohio and Michigan are treated with more disparity and more unfairness. Unlike most elections, the Electoral College gives more votes to smaller states than their population would allow, gives more votes to states for non-voting populations, including illegal aliens counted for census purposes, gives no consideration to voter turnout or who casts the most votes nationally, disenfranchises minority party voters of either party in any state that fails to support the winning candidate, encourages political campaigns to ignore the majority of voters who reside in a non-swing state in any given election, and sometimes elects a candidate who did not receive the most votes. The Constitutional Convention of 1787 in Philadelphia agreed to a number of compromises with those who feared that too much representative democracy might be a bad thing. But as the country matured, the states first expanded the right to vote to non-property owners. After a terrible civil war, we included African Americans among the electorate, and with the 19th Amendment, we finally included women. In subsequent decades, we worked to assure these voting rights with passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and subsequent years, and other laws. As we expanded the electorate and protected the right to vote, we also expanded the high political offices subject to the voter's discretion. The 17th Amendment was ratified in 1913, providing for the direct election of United States senators. States have moved to provide popular will to the selection of presidential electors. Originally, many state legislatures chose the electors without giving the public a say, and that still remains constitutionally permissible. As recently as 1876, electors were chosen by the state legislature in Colorado without the voters having a shot at saying who they favored. Over time, every legislature has handed its power to choose the state's electors to the people, but the Constitution still, to this day, leaves the matter up to the legislatures. Now the legislatures can make presidential elections even more democratic by agreeing to give their electors to the winner of the national popular vote, effectively negating the unfairness of the Electoral College. The Electoral College has handed the presidency to the popular vote loser 4 times: John Quincy Adams over Andrew Jackson in 1824, Rutherford B. Hayes over Samuel Tilden in 1876, Benjamin Harrison over Grover Cleveland in 1888, and George Bush over Al Gore in 2000. And there have been close calls. In 2004, for instance, Bush defeated John Kerry by more than 3 million votes, yet a shift of about 60,000 votes in Ohio would have elected Kerry. In 1960, Richard Nixon would have defeated popular vote winner John Kennedy with a switch of 4,430 votes in Illinois and 4,782 votes in South Carolina. In 1948, Thomas Dewey would have defeated popular vote winner Harry Truman with a switch of 3,554 votes in Ohio and 42,835 in New Jersey. There is no reason in the 21st century for this absurdity and arbitrariness. It takes some time to understand this issue, but in the end, it's simple. It's time we elect our president according to 21st century principles, not an 18th century compromise. That concludes my statement. I'm pleased to introduce my colleague Tom Creighton of Lancaster County, who will be the lead sponsor of this legislation.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mark. I commend you on a great effort and a passion to make this happen. I'm sure Mark and I can muster the votes in the House, and we'll get it out of the House. Now we have to work on the Senate. But I just briefly, you know, the Electoral College, I learned about that in civics class in 8th grade, I believe, and I could never understand it. And after every electoral election, you always crossed your fingers that the guy you wanted won. But you know, it's an archaic system, and I asked the question, how did it ever come about? And I hate to criticize our founding fathers, but you know, it says "we the people" in the Constitution, but the way they set up the electoral college, the people elect an elector, and then that elector elects the president. So it is not truly "we the people," and I believe this popular vote effort will bring fairness, and it will bring reason and logic to the whole process, so we can have confidence in our system. So thanks again. It's an honor to be a part of your effort, and we'll make it happen here in Pennsylvania.
Thank
Stay
you.
up here. We'll take some questions. Stay here. Okay, great job. Thank you. You did a great job of localizing this issue for the state of Pennsylvania and you from the ethical perspective. We'll take some questions now. Yes, ma'am.
Would the bill give Pennsylvania's electors to the popular vote tally here or to the popular vote tally nationally?
To the popular vote tally nationally. No,
Why is that? As opposed to just like what the popular vote does here in Pennsylvania?
well, that's basically the system we have now, where all the electoral votes go. It's a winner-take-all system, which is very unfair to the losing side because none of their votes count anywhere. Okay, the way this would work, as soon as we have enough electoral votes, 270 that states that join this compact, and I assume the rest would join it shortly afterwards. It's the candidate that gets the most votes nationwide, not just in the states that are honoring this new process, nationwide. They're going to vote for the candidate who wins the election nationwide.
I guess how many elections would that actually make a difference in? Because it's still all of the state's electoral votes going to the person who's winning the popular vote, just now nationally as opposed to a state. How many
Yeah,
elections would that
but with the system we have today, we've had 4 elections where the person that got the highest number of votes lost the election. And it's because of the way the electoral votes break out state by state. Basically, what we're doing with this process is saying, however the people vote in the entire country as a unit, not state by state, but as a unit, they will determine who the president of the United States is.
So it's effectively doing away with the electoral college in a sense.
Well, technically, we're not doing away with it because, first of all, the electoral college concept is in the Constitution. We're not interested in changing the Constitution. But the great thing about this step is that someday, for some reason, and I can't speculate what that might be, the Electoral College may want to change something again, and they will be in existence to be able to do that, based on, what the majority of the states want. Yes?
Different states have different rules for their electors. In Pennsylvania, can an elector deviate from what they were going to do previously? I mean, can they change their mind when the electoral college?
Well, historically, under the current system, it's never happened that I know of. Technically, they can, but it's never happened. Okay.
You were talking a lot about the emphasis that this puts on battleground states, but to be fair, Pennsylvania has been a battleground state.
You mean the de-emphasis it puts on the battleground states? If we go with national popular vote, it's going to de-emphasize battleground states.
Right, I'm sorry. I mean the current system emphasizes
Okay.
the battleground states. So for Pennsylvania, is this a wise move since we are one of those swing states?
Well, I'll let these gentlemen, they're more qualified to answer that question, but I'm going to start with one thing. 78% of the people in Pennsylvania want it changed. Nationwide, it's 75%. You guys want to add anything?
Yeah, I would say that there'd be voters in Pennsylvania who'd be willing to live with a few less television commercials. I bet you that, voters in Pennsylvania have seen enough television commercials, and in other states they might like to see some television commercials and not just have it in Pennsildvania. The fact is that it doesn't make any real difference to the people of Pennsylvania whether a candidate carries the vote in Pennsylvania by 1,000 votes or whether he carries it by 750,000, as President Obama did. And this would mean that there probably would be more intense campaigning in many parts of Pennsylvania than there is now, as the margin by which Pennsylvania is carried makes a difference, which it doesn't make a difference now. But I think we can let some other states have a few of our campaign commercials.
Got another one?
Yeah.
You got a list?
No, I
That's
don't.
okay. Go ahead. I'm kidding.
Was there any thought given to splitting the state's electoral votes based on the popular?
What she is suggesting is called proportional voting. The problem with proportional voting, you still have the same issue of equal representation, because the number of electoral votes for one state could be one for every 60,000 people, another state one for every 300,000 people. Okay, and you still have, one of the other issues that hasn't happened to us yet, and I hope it never happens, certainly it won't happen if we change it, is with 540 electoral votes, you would think the odds are someday we're going to have a tie. And when you have a tie, the House of Representatives chooses the president. And I don't know if most of the American people would be happy with that result. The other great benefit of this, and I think I mentioned it earlier, is not only is it the right thing to do, but I think it's a great way to re-energize our citizens in their interest level in government, because they know their vote counts equally. They know the candidate with the least, or with the most number of votes is going to win, and takes political gamesmanship right out of it. I mean, candidates spending 98% of their resources in 15 states is a real insult to me, whether I'm in a flyover state or a battleground state. Anything else? Thanks very much for coming out. Appreciate it.
Okay.